Preface: when justice takes the shape of thunder. In Greek mythology, Zeus is revered as the supreme god, the guardian of justice, order, and cosmic law. His thunderbolt is said to strike down chaos, rebellion, and moral transgression, restoring balance wherever it falls. To the ancient world, this image was reassuring, a single, all-powerful authority standing between civilization and collapse. But justice, when embodied by a force that cannot be questioned, begins to reveal a more unsettling dimension. What does justice mean when it speaks only in lightning? When judgment arrives without explanation, appeal, or dialogue? Zeus's authority is absolute not only because of his power, but because no higher standard exists above him. He is at once the lawmaker, the judge, and the executioner. In such a system, justice is no longer a shared principle, it becomes a command. Mythology often celebrates this certainty. The thunder does not hesitate, it acts. Yet beneath the clarity of divine punishment lies a troubling silence. Those who are struck do not testify. Those who survive do not question. Order is preserved, but at the cost of consent. This preface does not seek to condemn Zeus as a tyrant, nor to praise him as a flawless symbol of righteousness. Instead, it invites a deeper question. Is Zeus the embodiment of justice itself, or the divine personification of fear that keeps disorder at bay? Perhaps he is both. And perhaps the most enduring lesson of Zeus is not found in the thunderbolt he wields, but in the uneasy truth that justice enforced by fear can resemble peace, until someone dares to ask who, if anyone, holds the thunder to account. Part 1. Zeus, the lawmaker, or the one above the law. In the mythology of ancient Greece, Zeus is consistently portrayed as the supreme guarantor of justice. He is invoked as the protector of oaths, the punisher of perjury, and the divine authority who restores balance when cosmic order is threatened. Kings claim legitimacy in his name. Laws are sworn beneath his sky, and justice itself is imagined as descending from Olympus through his will. Yet embedded within this image is a paradox that mythology rarely confronts directly. Can a being who creates the law also be bound by it? Zeus does not inherit a legal system. He emerges from chaos and imposes one. His authority is not granted by consensus, tradition, or moral consensus, but by victory. The overthrow of Cronus and the Titans is remembered as liberation, yet it is also the foundational act of violence upon which Olympian law is built. Zeus's first claim to justice is therefore inseparable from force. The law begins not with agreement, but with conquest. Justice born from rebellion. Zeus's rise to power is itself an act of rebellion against an established order. Cronus, though cruel and paranoid, was the reigning authority of the cosmos. By defeating him, Zeus does not abolish tyranny, he replaces it. This replacement is justified not through ethical argument, but through mythic framing. Cronus is remembered as monstrous, Zeus is remembered as necessary. In one speculative tradition, it is said that after the Titanomachy, Zeus proclaimed a simple principle before the gathered gods: order exists because I prevailed. From that moment on, victory and legitimacy became indistinguishable. The law was no longer something that governed power, it was something that flowed from it. This raises an unsettling implication. If justice is defined by the victor, then justice has no independent meaning. It becomes retrospective, applied only after power has already decided the outcome. Zeus does not uphold justice. Justice conforms to Zeus. The dual role, judge and defendant. One of the most striking features of Zeus's rule is that he occupies every legal position simultaneously. He is the source of law, the interpreter of law, and the enforcer of law. There exists no divine court above him, no higher principle to which he must answer. When Zeus judges others, his rulings are final. When Zeus himself violates norms, oaths, marriages, boundaries, there is no mechanism for accountability. Mythology resolves this contradiction not by addressing it, but by normalizing it. Zeus's actions are never described as illegal, they are described as expressions of divine will. The absence of legal restraint is reframed as transcendence. Zeus does not break the law, he defines what breaking the law means. This is the hallmark of absolute sovereignty. The ruler is not above the law because he defies it, but because the law ceases to exist independently of him. Oaths, punishment, and selective justice. Zeus is famously the god who punishes oath-breakers. Mortals and gods alike fear his wrath when vows are violated. Yet Zeus himself breaks promises repeatedly, romantic, political, and moral, without consequence. This selective enforcement reveals a deeper truth. Justice under Zeus is asymmetrical. The punishment of Prometheus illustrates this clearly. Prometheus defies Zeus by aiding humanity, an act framed as both theft and deception. Zeus responds with eternal torture. The severity of the punishment far exceeds the offense, suggesting that the true crime was not theft, but defiance. Prometheus challenges Zeus's exclusive authority over progress and foresight. Justice, in this context, functions less as moral correction and more as deterrence. Zeus does not punish wrongdoing. He punishes challenges to hierarchy. Law becomes a tool for preserving dominance, not for ensuring fairness. Law is performance, not principle. Zeus's justice is theatrical. Thunder, lightning, public punishment. These are not quiet acts of legal reasoning, but spectacular displays of power. They serve a psychological function, to remind gods and mortals alike that order is enforced, not negotiated. In a fictionalized myth, it is said that a lesser god once asked Zeus whether his punishment of a mortal was truly just. Zeus answered not with explanation, but with silence, and the sky darkened. The question was never asked again. Justice that cannot be questioned does not require justification. It requires only fear, the absence of due process. There is no trial in Zeus's justice. Accusation and punishment collapse into a single moment. The thunderbolt does not wait for defense, context, or intent. This immediacy is often praised as decisiveness, but it also eliminates any concept of proportionality or mercy. In human societies, law evolves to limit the power of rulers. Under Zeus, law exists to reinforce it. There is no appeal because there is no higher authority. The result is stability, but a stability rooted in submission rather than trust. Hera, dissent, and the illusion of order. Even among the gods, dissent exists, but it is constrained. Hera's opposition to Zeus is mythologized as jealousy rather than political resistance. Athena's wisdom never challenges Zeus's authority. Poseidon's rebellions always fail. These narratives reinforce a single message. Questioning Zeus is either petty, foolish, or doomed. In this way, mythology itself becomes an extension of law. Stories teach obedience more effectively than punishment. By shaping how dissent is remembered, Zeus ensures that resistance appears irrational rather than principled. Law without limits. The most dangerous aspect of Zeus's justice is not cruelty, it is finality. Because Zeus cannot be judged, his law cannot evolve. Mistakes cannot be corrected, only reinterpreted. Infallibility is assumed, not proven. This creates a frozen moral universe. Right and wrong are fixed by authority rather than reason. Over time, justice loses its ethical content and becomes pure enforcement. A necessary tyrant? And yet, mythology insists that without Zeus, chaos would return. The Titans would rise. The world would collapse. Zeus's law, however flawed, is portrayed as preferable to disorder. This raises the most difficult question of all. Is unjust order better than chaotic freedom? Zeus may not be fair, but he is effective. He prevents collapse. He stabilizes existence. In this sense, he embodies a tragic truth. Justice imposed by fear may still function as justice. Conclusion of Part 1. Zeus stands at the intersection of law and power, justice and domination. He is both the creator of order and its greatest exception. His reign reveals a fundamental paradox of authority. The stronger the lawmaker, the weaker the law becomes as an independent principle. Zeus is not merely above the law. He is the reason the law has no ceiling. And in asking whether Zeus is the lawmaker or the one beyond the law, mythology confronts us with a question that echoes far beyond Olympus. When justice depends entirely on power, is it still justice, or simply fear, given a name? Part 2. Thunder and Fear, the Tools of Rule on Olympus. If law defines the structure of Zeus's authority, then fear is the force that sustains it. Olympus does not endure because it is loved, nor because it is universally perceived as just, but because it is feared. At the heart of this fear stands the thunderbolt, not merely as a weapon, but as a symbol, a warning, and a psychological instrument of domination. Thunder, in the mythology of Zeus, is not only destructive. It is communicative. It speaks without language, commands without dialogue, and convinces without argument. Where law seeks obedience through legitimacy, fear demands obedience through anticipation. Zeus understands this distinction intuitively. His reign is not maintained by constant violence, but by the ever-present possibility of it. The thunderbolt as political language. The thunderbolt is often described as Zeus's signature weapon, forged by the Cyclopes during the Titanomachy. Yet its true power lies not in its physical force, but in its semiotic function. Lightning does not merely strike, it announces. The sky darkens, the air trembles, and before destruction occurs, fear has already done its work. In this sense, thunder is Olympus's primary political language. It bypasses reason and appeals directly to instinct. Mortals do not need to understand Zeus's intentions, they only need to recognize the sound. Fear compresses complex moral judgments into a single, primal response: submission. In a fictionalized fragment attributed to an unnamed priest of Dodona, it is written, "The thunder answers questions before they are spoken." It teaches obedience by teaching silence. This silence is essential. Fear does not invite debate, it ends it. Fear as preventative governance. Zeus does not rule through constant punishment. On the contrary, his punishments are relatively rare. This rarity enhances their effectiveness. Each act of divine violence becomes legendary, retold, and exaggerated until it functions as a warning rather than an event. The fates of Prometheus, Lycaon, and Phaeton are not isolated moral lessons. They are case studies in deterrence. Zeus does not need to strike every rebel. He needs only to strike a few, decisively and memorably. Fear then governs in his absence. This method of rule mirrors what later political theorists would recognize as exemplary violence, punishment designed less to correct the offender than to instruct the observer. Olympus is stable not because dissent is impossible, but because its cost is vividly known. Divine terror and mortal psychology. Fear under Zeus operates across ontological boundaries. Mortals fear the gods because they are unpredictable. Gods fear Zeus because he is absolute. Even immortality offers no protection from thunder. This universality of vulnerability is key to Zeus's dominance. For mortals, fear takes the form of ritual compliance. Sacrifices, prayers, and taboos are not acts of love, but of precaution. The gods are appeased not because they are benevolent, but because they are dangerous. In a speculative myth, a mortal king once asked an oracle why Zeus demanded so many offerings. The oracle replied, "Because fear fades faster than faith." Ritual renews fear. Each sacrifice is a reminder that disaster has been postponed, not eliminated. Fear among the gods. It is tempting to imagine Olympus as a council of equals, but mythology repeatedly undermines this image. The gods fear Zeus, not openly, not always consciously, but structurally. His authority shapes their behavior even when he is absent. Hera plots, but never dethrones. Poseidon rebels, but retreats. Athena advises, but does not command. Each god occupies a carefully bounded domain, defined less by empowerment than by limitation. These boundaries are enforced not through written decree, but through memory, through the recollection of what happened to those who crossed Zeus. Even divine laughter often conceals anxiety. The gods feast, argue, and conspire, but beneath their immortality lies an unspoken understanding. Olympus exists at Zeus's discretion. Fear versus love. Unlike later monotheistic deities, Zeus is not primarily a god of love. He does not seek devotion for its own sake. Loyalty born of affection is unstable. Loyalty born of fear is reliable. Zeus understands this difference. When mortals love the gods, they feel entitled to explanation. When they fear them, they accept mystery. Zeus prefers the latter. His justice is opaque by design. Transparency invites scrutiny. Obscurity invites reverence. This preference explains why Zeus rarely explains his actions. Silence amplifies fear. The unknown is more terrifying than the unjust. By withholding rationale, Zeus transforms every thunderbolt into a lesson without content, an empty signifier filled by dread. The economy of fear. Fear on Olympus operates as a regulated resource. Too much fear leads to rebellion born of desperation. Too little leads to complacency. Zeus's genius lies in his calibration. He allows minor transgressions to go unpunished. He tolerates divine squabbles. He even endures insults. But when a boundary is truly threatened, when hierarchy itself is questioned, he responds with overwhelming force. This selective enforcement maintains tension without collapse. The gods never know exactly where the line lies. Uncertainty becomes control. In one fictional account, Hermes is said to have remarked, "The thunder does not strike often, but when it does, it strikes where memory will not forget." Myth as infrastructure of fear. Stories are the architecture of fear. Mythology does not merely record Zeus's punishments, it ritualizes them. Each retelling reinforces the emotional reality of divine terror. Children grow up hearing of mortals reduced to ash, of hubris answered by annihilation. These stories are not moral education, they are conditioning. By the time a mortal is capable of rebellion, fear has already shaped their imagination. Even philosophers struggle to escape this influence. Rational inquiry may question Zeus's justice, but it rarely denies his power. Fear precedes thought. Thunder as surveillance. Thunder is omnipresent. It can strike anywhere. This unpredictability creates a sense of constant observation. Zeus does not need to watch. Mortals behave as though he does. This phenomenon resembles what modern thinkers would call internalized control. Fear becomes self-regulating. Individuals police themselves to avoid divine attention. In this way, Zeus's thunder functions less as a weapon and more as a surveillance system. Its power lies in its potential, not its use. The cost of fear-based rule. Fear stabilizes Olympus, but it also corrodes it. Trust cannot grow under constant threat. Creativity becomes cautious. Loyalty becomes performative. Prometheus's rebellion exposes this weakness. His defiance is not merely an act of compassion. It is a critique of Zeus's rule. By aiding humanity, Prometheus suggests that fear is not the only path to order. Zeus's brutal response reveals insecurity. Fear-based systems tolerate no alternatives. Compassion becomes subversion. Hope becomes treason. The illusion of eternal control. Zeus believes fear is eternal, but mythology hints otherwise. Prophecies warn of sons who may overthrow fathers. Even Zeus fears replacement. This fear mirrors his own methods. Just as he governs through terror, he anticipates terror in return. Power maintained by fear is never truly secure. It is always anticipating the moment when fear will no longer be enough. In a speculative prophecy, it is said that Zeus once dreamed of a world where thunder no longer frightened anyone. He awoke in silence, and for the first time, felt fear himself. Conclusion of Part 2. Thunder and fear are not accidental features of Zeus's rule. They are its foundation. Law gives Zeus legitimacy, but fear gives him endurance. Olympus stands not because it is just, but because it is terrifying. Yet fear, for all its effectiveness, is a fragile tool. It demands constant reinforcement. It creates obedience, but never loyalty. And in the long arc of mythology, fear always plants the seeds of its own undoing. Zeus rules the sky with thunder, but beneath the storm lies a question he can never fully silence. When fear is the tool of order, what happens when fear itself begins to fade? Part 3. Justice, or stability bought with silence. At the end of all thunder, beyond fear and law, there remains a quieter question, one far more dangerous than rebellion or chaos. Is Zeus's reign truly just, or is it merely stable? Olympus does not burn. The cosmos does not collapse. Seasons follow their cycles. The sun rises, storms obey patterns, and the hierarchy of gods remains intact. By all visible measures, Zeus's rule is successful. Yet stability alone is not justice. Order can exist without fairness. Silence can be mistaken for peace. This final tension, between justice and enforced quiet, defines the deepest contradiction of Zeus's authority. Silence as a political achievement. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the absence of challenge. Under Zeus, silence is everywhere. Mortals rarely question divine judgment. Gods argue, but do not revolt. Prophecies are whispered, not proclaimed. Even dissent takes the form of allegory rather than accusation. This silence is not natural. It is cultivated. Justice invites speech. It demands explanation, testimony, contradiction. A just system expects to be questioned because it trusts its own legitimacy. Zeus's system does not invite questions, it discourages them. Silence becomes the price of survival. In a fictional fragment attributed to a forgotten muse, it is written, Olympus is not quiet because it is harmonious. It is quiet because memory has learned what happens to voices that rise too high. The difference between peace and stillness. Peace is active. It requires participation, consent, and renewal. Stillness, by contrast, is passive. It endures as long as nothing moves. Zeus confuses the two, or perhaps intentionally merges them. When storms cease, when wars end, when rebellion fails, Zeus presents the outcome as justice fulfilled. But what if calm is simply exhaustion? What if obedience is not agreement, but resignation? The myths offer clues. After divine punishment, there is rarely reconciliation. Zeus does not heal, he concludes. His judgments are final, not restorative. Silence follows, not because harmony is achieved, but because resistance has been erased. Justice without voice. Justice without voice is indistinguishable from decree. Mortals punished by Zeus do not receive trials. Gods who defy him are not debated, they are subdued. Even when Zeus acts justly, the process remains opaque. Outcome replaces procedure. This raises a critical philosophical problem. If justice cannot be examined, can it still be called justice? In later human societies, justice becomes inseparable from visibility, courts, laws, arguments, appeals. Zeus's justice predates these ideas. It belongs to an older logic, where authority itself defines truth. The danger of such a system is not cruelty, it is infallibility. A ruler who cannot be wrong no longer needs to be fair. The silence of the gods. Even the Olympians are quiet when it matters most. Hera endures humiliation. Athena tempers her wisdom. Poseidon retreats into the sea. Each god learns the boundaries of permissible speech. Their silence is not ignorance, it is calculation. They know Zeus's justice may protect the structure of Olympus, but not necessarily its inhabitants. Yet speaking risks destabilization, and destabilization invites thunder. Thus, stability becomes a shared conspiracy. The gods protect the system that limits them because the alternative is annihilation. Silence becomes loyalty. Stability as moral currency. Zeus frequently justifies his actions through outcomes. The world continues. Humanity survives. Chaos is contained. This logic transforms stability into moral currency. If the cosmos remains intact, then any cost becomes acceptable. Suffering is reframed as necessary. Injustice becomes collateral. This reasoning is seductive. It promises safety in exchange for acquiescence. But it also erases individual experience. Those struck by lightning are reduced to examples, not victims. Justice measured only by survival ceases to be justice at all. It becomes management. Prometheus and the crime of speaking. Prometheus's greatest offense is not theft, but speech. By giving fire to humanity, he gives them tools. By defying Zeus openly, he gives them language. He shows that divine authority can be questioned, and survived, at least briefly. Zeus's response is not merely punitive. It is symbolic. Prometheus is chained in silence. His screams echo, but his argument is never answered. This is critical. Zeus does not debate Prometheus. He erases him from discourse. Silence is restored. In this act, Zeus reveals his fear, not of chaos, but of conversation. The cost of silent order. A world governed by silence does not evolve. It stagnates. Without dissent, injustice goes uncorrected. Without speech, wisdom cannot challenge power. Zeus's Olympus is eternal, but it is also static. It repeats cycles without reflection. The irony is profound. Zeus overthrew his father to escape tyranny, yet creates a system that cannot question itself. Silence becomes inheritance. Justice as performance. Zeus's justice is theatrical. Thunder, spectacle, and symbolism replace explanation. The performance convinces observers that justice has occurred, even if its logic remains hidden. This performative justice relies on awe. Awe overwhelms doubt. When thunder speaks, reason listens quietly. But performance without accountability risks becoming ritualized violence. Justice becomes something that looks right, sounds right, feels inevitable, without ever being examined. The silent consent of mortals. Mortals adapt. They learn not to ask why the gods act, only how to appease them. Ritual replaces ethics. Sacrifice replaces dialogue. Silence becomes tradition. Over generations, this silence is mistaken for faith. But faith without choice is obedience. And obedience without voice is submission. Zeus's greatest success may be this transformation, the conversion of fear into culture. Is stability enough? The central question remains unresolved. Is a stable world inherently just? Zeus would answer yes. The cosmos endures. Order remains. That is proof enough. But mythology itself suggests doubt. Prophecies warn of change. Suns may rise. Silence may break. Justice, unlike stability, is not static. It must be renewed. Zeus's system resists renewal because renewal invites uncertainty. Thus, Zeus chooses stillness over justice, not out of malice, but out of fear. The paradox of absolute power. Absolute power eliminates chaos, but also eliminates correction. Zeus cannot be appealed to because there is no higher court. His justice ends conversation rather than beginning it. Silence becomes the final verdict. Yet in silencing others, Zeus isolates himself. No one speaks truth upward. No one warns him of error. His authority becomes echoing thunder in an empty sky. Power without dialogue becomes brittle. The unanswered question. In a speculative ending preserved only in fragments, it is said that Zeus once listened to the world in silence. No prayers, no thunder, no defiance. For a moment, order remained. Then he asked quietly, "Is this peace, or merely quiet?" The myth does not answer. Conclusion of Part 3. Zeus's reign is not sustained by justice alone, nor by fear alone, but by silence. Silence smooths injustice into stability. Silence transforms fear into tradition. Silence convinces gods and mortals alike that order is natural, eternal, unquestionable. Yet silence is fragile. It holds only as long as no one speaks. And history, both mythic and human, suggests that silence never lasts forever. When it breaks, the thunder may return, or something far more dangerous may rise. A voice. Conclusion. Zeus is not merely a god. Zeus is not merely a god carved into marble or immortalized in myth. He is an idea, one that has endured far longer than Olympus itself. He represents the ancient human struggle to reconcile power with justice, order with freedom, and stability with truth. In the figure of Zeus, mythology does not offer simple answers. Instead, it presents a paradox. Zeus is the guardian of cosmic balance, yet he maintains that balance through fear. He is the enforcer of justice, yet his justice is rarely questioned and never appealed. He brings order to chaos, but at the cost of silence. This contradiction is not a flaw of myth, it is its warning. Zeus reflects a timeless question that every civilization eventually faces. Is authority legitimate because it preserves stability or because it upholds fairness? When silence replaces dialogue, when fear replaces consent, power may endure, but justice begins to fade. The endurance of Zeus is not found in thunder or dominion over the sky. It is found in how familiar he remains. His shadow stretches beyond mythology into every system where power claims righteousness without accountability, where order is valued more than voice, and where silence is mistaken for peace. Zeus does not need worship to survive. He lives wherever unquestioned authority reigns. And perhaps that is the final truth mythology leaves us with. The most dangerous gods are not those who demand belief, but those who never need to ask for it. Zeus is not only a god of the past. He is a mirror, and what we see in him depends entirely on how we choose to understand power, justice, and the cost of silence. Part 3. Zeus and the fear of overthrow. At the height of his power, Zeus appears invincible. He rules the sky, commands thunder and lightning, presides over Olympus, and enforces cosmic order. No god openly challenges him. No titan rises again. The universe, at least on the surface, seems stable. Yet beneath this apparent permanence lies a persistent and corrosive fear, the fear of being overthrown. This fear is not incidental. It is foundational. Zeus's authority is born from rebellion. He did not inherit the cosmos peacefully. He seized it by force from his father, Cronus. And because his rise mirrors Cronus's fall, Zeus understands something few rulers ever admit. Power gained through overthrow carries within it the certainty of repetition. What has happened once can happen again. Thus, Zeus's reign is not merely about ruling the present. It is about preventing the future. The curse of the successor. The defining trauma of Zeus's existence is inheritance itself. Cronus devoured his children out of fear that one would replace him, fulfilling a prophecy he could not escape. Zeus survived, rebelled, and fulfilled that prophecy. In doing so, he did not break the cycle, he completed it. Official mythology portrays Zeus as wiser than his father, a ruler who learned from Cronus's mistakes. But learning does not always lead to transcendence. Sometimes it leads to refinement. Where Cronus used brute violence, Zeus used foresight, strategy, and narrative control. Where Cronus swallowed his children, Zeus swallowed Métis. The act is often explained as cleverness, a necessary step to prevent a dangerous prophecy. But stripped of poetic justification, it is a chilling repetition, the elimination of a future threat before it can speak. Athena's later birth, from Zeus's own head, is framed as miraculous. Yet it also symbolizes a closed system of power. Wisdom, war, and governance are born from Zeus alone. No independent lineage remains. Métis and the fear of thought. Métis, the Titaness of wisdom and cunning, represents more than a prophetic danger. She embodies strategic intelligence, the kind that does not rely on force. Zeus's decision to consume her is often interpreted as a preventive act against a foretold son greater than his father. But another interpretation is possible. Zeus did not fear a child. He feared thought that could rival his own. By absorbing Métis, Zeus internalized wisdom while destroying its autonomy. From that point on, intelligence exists only as an extension of Zeus's will. Athena, though formidable, never challenges his authority. She advises, strategizes, and executes, but always within the framework of Olympian hierarchy. This act reveals a crucial aspect of Zeus's psychology. He does not merely fear physical rebellion. He fears conceptual alternatives, ways of thinking about power that do not place him at the center. The surveillance of Olympus. Unlike the chaotic reign of the Titans, Zeus's Olympus is orderly, structured, and deeply monitored. Gods have domains, responsibilities, and boundaries. On the surface, this appears to be governance. Beneath it, it functions as containment. Every god is powerful, but none are whole. Poseidon controls the sea, but not the sky. Hades rules the dead, but is isolated from Olympus. Ares embodies violence, but lacks strategy. Apollo sees the future, but does not rule it. Each god is given power, but never enough to threaten the throne. This fragmentation is intentional. Zeus does not centralize power by hoarding it. He distributes it strategically, ensuring dependence. Olympus becomes a network of controlled competencies, all requiring Zeus's coordination. Even rebellion, when it occurs, is limited. The myth of Hera, Athena, and Poseidon conspiring to overthrow Zeus ends not with revolution, but humiliation. Zeus escapes, punishes, and restores order. The lesson is clear. Dissent is possible, but futile. Law is a weapon against fate. Zeus is often called the god of justice, but justice under Zeus is not neutral, it is preventive. His laws are not merely responses to wrongdoing. They are mechanisms designed to suppress the emergence of threats. Prophecies, in particular, terrify Zeus. Unlike enemies, they cannot be struck by lightning. They exist outside time, immune to force. Zeus's response is to control or eliminate those who speak them. Oracles are bound by ritual. Seers are cursed with disbelief. Prophets are punished for clarity. The future, under Zeus's reign, is not abolished, but it is blurred. By destabilizing prophecy, Zeus turns fate into noise. Nothing is clear enough to act upon. In this ambiguity, his rule survives. The punishment of Prometheus, a warning to the future. No myth better illustrates Zeus's fear of overthrow than the punishment of Prometheus. Officially, Prometheus is punished for stealing fire and deceiving Zeus. But fire is not merely a tool, it is a symbol of autonomy. Fire allows mortals to build, create, and eventually question gods. Prometheus does not threaten Zeus with armies. He threatens him with progress. Zeus's response is not proportionate, It is exemplary. Eternal punishment, publicly displayed, serves as a warning across time. This is not justice. It is deterrence. Prometheus becomes a living message. Foresight leads to suffering. Rebellion leads to eternity in chains. And yet, paradoxically, the myth preserves Prometheus's defiance. Zeus cannot erase him completely. In punishing Prometheus, Zeus reveals the limits of his control. The gods who disappear. Perhaps the most unsettling evidence of Zeus's fear lies not in punishment, but in absence. Certain divine figures vanish from mythology without explanation. Minor gods fade. Titans are forgotten. Spirits dissolve into abstraction. These disappearances suggest a quieter method of control, erasure. A god without worship ceases to matter. A myth untold loses power. Zeus does not need to kill every threat. He only needs to ensure it is no longer remembered. In this way, Zeus governs not just the present, but memory itself. What is forgotten cannot return. Eternal rule as stagnation. Zeus's ultimate triumph is stability. But stability, when prolonged indefinitely, becomes stagnation. Olympus does not evolve. Power does not rotate. There is no succession plan, only prevention. Unlike human kings, Zeus cannot die. And so, the problem of succession becomes infinite. His fear does not end, it compounds. Every generation that passes without challenge reinforces the myth of inevitability. Zeus becomes less a ruler and more a condition of existence. To imagine a world without Zeus becomes impossible. And yet, that impossibility is itself a weakness. Systems that cannot imagine their end are unprepared for it. The paradox of absolute power. Zeus's greatest strength is also his greatest vulnerability. Absolute power requires absolute vigilance. There can be no rest, no trust, no true intimacy. Every ally is a potential successor. Every child is a possible prophecy. In this sense, Zeus is profoundly alone. He sits atop Olympus not as a king among peers, but as a singularity. All relationships are vertical. Love becomes risky. Trust becomes impossible. Fear becomes policy. Zeus rules forever, but never peacefully. Rebellion as an idea, not an event. Perhaps the most radical interpretation of Zeus's fear is that rebellion has already occurred, not in war, but in thought. Each retelling of myth that questions Zeus's morality is a quiet insurrection. Each reinterpretation that sympathizes with titans, women, or punished figures destabilizes the official narrative. Zeus cannot strike down interpretation. The more absolute his power becomes, the more fragile his story grows. And stories, unlike gods, do not obey. Conclusion of Part 3. Zeus's fear of overthrow is not a weakness. It is the engine of his rule. It shapes his laws, his relationships, and his mythology. He is not merely a god who fears losing power. He is a god who understands that power is temporary, even when eternal. In trying to prevent the future, Zeus freezes it. In trying to silence fate, he amplifies it. His reign becomes a monument to control and a warning about its cost. The tragedy of Zeus is not that he is cruel or unjust or flawed. It is that he is aware. Aware that no throne is truly eternal. Aware that history repeats. Aware that one day, someone will read the myths differently. And that reinterpretation, not rebellion, may finally be what brings Olympus to an end. Because when a god must control the future to survive the present, the end has already begun. Conclusion. Hidden truths do not weaken Zeus. The stories concealed by official mythology do not diminish Zeus. They transform him. They strip away the simplicity of divine perfection and reveal something far more enduring, a ruler shaped by power, fear, and contradiction. Zeus does not become weaker when examined closely. On the contrary, he becomes more formidable because he becomes more real. To acknowledge the hidden truths of Olympus is not to dethrone Zeus, but to understand the nature of absolute authority. Zeus is not merely the god of thunder. He is the embodiment of dominance sustained over time. His strength lies not only in lightning and law, but in narrative control, memory, and silence. These are the tools that allow power to survive long after force alone would fail. By confronting the stories that were softened, renamed, or erased, we are not condemning Zeus. We are questioning the system that required such erasure in the first place. The suppressed voices, The distorted loves and the vanished gods do not weaken Olympus. They expose its foundations. And foundations, once seen, can no longer pretend to be eternal truths. In the end, Zeus remains supreme not because he is morally flawless, but because he is structurally invincible, at least within the world he designed. Yet even this invincibility has limits. Myths evolve. Interpretations shift. What was once unquestionable becomes debatable. The greatest threat to absolute power is not rebellion, but understanding. And as long as these hidden stories continue to be told, Zeus will endure, not as an untouchable idol, but as a timeless warning that every throne, even a divine one, stands upon truths it cannot fully erase.